was raised in a family that honored both Dr. Betty and your father. Certainly for my mother, the widows, I know she did not live her life to be the widow ex, but the widows of our slain leaders were huge role models for their daughters. They wanted to make sure that we saw that in the absence of the father, in the absence of the person who had put you on the map, you could still go out and do extraordinary things. And I think that resonated with my mother, who had been sent to college to marry someone and successfully did that and didn't feel she had succeeded just because she had married someone and spent a life trying to come out from under the shadow of her successful husband. And she was very bent, as was your mother, on her 3 daughters having their own lives, their own identities, and their own possibilities. And so to be here in Women's History Month, when neither of our mothers are here with us, I wonder what it would have been for them to see Hillary Clinton become the first woman to lead a major ticket and now be a Secretary of State, our first African-American woman to be the UN ambassador, obviously Susan Rice, to see the first Latina ascend to the Supreme Court. It's so extraordinary, but when you think about the state of women, your mother it was a frequent and possibly one of the best quotes about it. She alluded to it in the film that we saw earlier, that women are 50% of the world's population. They do 2/3 of the world's work for 1/10 of the pay and own less than 1/100th of the property. And then at once at Stony Brook, she cracked a joke about it. This was when I was here, saying, ladies, we need to do some changing here, or we might want to consider holding a certain something back. And I just thought, well, that's an amazing thing to find humor in, which goes to your point. But it really, as a young woman here in my 20s, it was really a very powerful thing for me to be exposed to, I guess, to people in a world that I'd only read about. And she had a very strong passion for the one thing that guides my life, which was change. And she would say that there are some people in the world who just like change less than others. And I'm not one of those people. And she really believed in people having an agenda. And I look now at the state of young women, because you can't ask really yourself, for Women's History Month, what's happening with women in the world without really saying what's happening with girls in the world. Because the possibility for our young women is the definition of womanhood. And I look at the pregnancy rates that we have. I look at the AIDS rates in the communities of color, and then, to her values, I look at globalization. I look at the global citizen part of this and say, look at what is still happening with sexual trafficking for women. Look at what is still happening with educational rights for women around the world. And we have a very long way to go. But something I shared so deeply, certainly with you, with your entire family, and probably everyone on this board, on this panel, is the recognition that a global citizen has never been more possible because of social media. It's why I went into technology. What we saw happen with the Iran revolution, with the Iran elections, because of social media, and for the world to be able to be engaged in that, I do believe that if we're going to be able to achieve social justice for women around this country and across this globe, it will be because we no longer need institutions to say, okay, women, it's your chance. That each of us as individuals, with a cell phone and a computer and a heart, can touch the lives of women around this world without anyone giving us the blessing to do so. And I think there would be no greater tribute to Dr. Betty and to all of the incredible women who are here in this room, who knew and loved and worked with her, and the men as well, than to say, what can we as an individual do tonight and tomorrow for young women in need? And we don't need the blessing of anyone to do that.
Malcolm, in the autobiography, he explained a little bit of the evolution of his views on women's rights. He said when he had been in the Nation of Islam, he said that it had very strict laws and teachings about women, the core of them being that the true nature of a man is to be strong, and a woman's true nature is to be weak. And while a man must at all times respect his woman, at the same time he needs to understand that he must control her if he expects to get her respect. Now, if you knew Betty Shabazz, you knew that I knew in the 1980s and 90s, that was not a description of Dr. Betty Shabazz. I don't believe that was a description of Betty Dean Sanders in the 1930s or of the Betty X that Malcolm chose to marry in 1958. But you know, a lot of people will tell you that that was Malcolm's view, what I just said. But that was not Malcolm's view at the end of his life. He went through a change. And the trips he took to Africa and the Middle East had a big impact on him, as I'm sure the 7 years that he lived with Betty Shabazz had a big impact. And he said at the end of his life, he said, one thing I noticed in both the Middle East and Africa, that in every country that was progressive, the women were progressive. In every country that was underdeveloped and backward, it was the same degree the women were underdeveloped and backward. And he said, I became thoroughly convinced in my recent travels in the importance of giving freedom to the woman, giving her education and giving her incentive to go out there and put the same spirit and understanding in her children. And he says, I'm frankly proud of the contributions that women have made in the struggle for freedom, and I'm one person who's for giving them all the leeway possible because they've made a greater contribution than many of our men.
Amen.
As I said earlier, this center started out being a center in tribute to Malcolm X. It properly is and has become a center in tribute to Malcolm X and Dr. Betty Shabazz. And probably as much as anything else, the physical existence of this place is a testimony to the will and determination which was at the foundation of Betty's life. That the worst human experiences can in fact be turned into something that uplifts and serves humanity. And she, to be perfectly honest and simple, willed this place into existence. She willed it into existence. There was no money, there was no ownership, no nothing. But she said it will be a tribute to my husband, and it will be the place where he was killed and martyred. It will become a place of information, of knowledge, of mobilization, of capacity building for people who are still struggling for justice and freedom and human dignity. And so the place is properly a tribute to her work and his legacy.